Hari Om. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurme Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Our pranams to our Adi Guru, Pujya Gurus, and Guru Parampara. Team Vedanta welcomes you all. Namaste. This is the 7th session of Pancadashi, Chapter 7. Today, we will first get a recap from Venkatesh Sir of last week's session, followed by an introduction of today's verses by our teacher, Dr. Hegde. This will be then followed by all the presentations of us by the speakers of the day. First, the recap, Dr. Venkatesh Sir.
Thank you, Anita. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. We have heard 5 excellent presentations last week to understand verses from 7.37 to 7.58. Let us look back and see what we studied in that session before we proceed towards next set of verses. Shloka 37. In this verse, Vidyaranya discusses the third stage Vikshepa, as against his definition of Vikshepa as Karta Bhokta in verse 30. Here in this verse, he says the duties and sorrows which accompany Kartatva and Bhoktatva, which can be termed as samsara, is Vikshepa. He further adds the subtle and the physical bodies along with Chidabhasa, which is reflected consciousness and reflecting media also to the list of Vikshepa. Purapakshi questions this new addition of Chidabhasa. Next slide, sir. Shloka 44. Sattva Avarana says Brahman is not there. This is removed by Paroksha Jnana attained through scriptures and Guru that there is Brahman, Brahma Asti. Bhana Avarana says Brahman experience is not there. This Avarana goes by Aparoksha Jnana, that is, I am Brahman, Aham Brahma Asmi. Both the Avaranas go away on gaining self-knowledge. That is the benefit of 4th and 5th state of Paroksha Jnana and Aparoksha Jnana. These two come under Moksha Avasthas. This is again further emphasized in verse 45. Next slide, sir. Shloka 46. Aparoksha Jnana, that is Aham Brahmasmi, has destroyed Bhana Avarana. With this, superimposition of Jivatma goes and the false claim of Jivatva, which has presented as the third state before, is gone now. Once Jivatva goes, all the grief caused by Jivatva is also gone. Therefore, one can claim he is liberated. The second line of Shloka deals with the 6th stage, that is Shoka Nivritti. Just like the ropeness knowledge, as even it comes, knocks off the snakeness knowledge, which is a misconception, the Jiva status of misconception gets eliminated on gaining Aparoksha Jnana because it is false. Anything false, false because it is false. By the removal of Jivatva, Kartrutva goes away. Kartrutva is samsara. So, as samsara goes, shoka or sorrows go away. What remains is the 7th stage, Ananda. Next slide, says Shloka 47. Once we come to the 6th stage, all samsara is eliminated and withdrawn. One gets the original nature of eternal freedom called Nitya Muktatva. In the 7th stage, Nitya Muktatva is claimed, which has been already with me. This state of mind is that of total contentment, and I have natural Ananda, which is my Swarupa. Tripti, the 7th stage, is Atma Ananda, and I don't experience it, but I claim that I am that Ananda. This Jnana Ananda will last as long as I have this knowledge. A sorrow which can displace Atma Ananda will never come. Shloka 49. In this verse, Vidyaranya introduces 2 types of Aparoksha Jnana. One is Swaprakashatvam, the actual factual directness, and the second one is understood directness, which will become reality only when the actual directness is understood. In the Dashama story, when Guru says Dashamaha Asti, it is only accepted that the 10th man is there, but not yet understood. But when Guru tells Tattvamasi, you are that, it is understood Aparokshatvam, and that is liberation or moksha. Thus, the gap between Brahma Asti and Brahma Asmi is filled by the second type of Aparoksha Jnana through Mahavakya Upadesha or Jivatma Paramatma Aikya Upadesha. Next slide, sir. Shloka 50. Vidyaranya continues to say that even during the fourth stage, when Brahman is defined through Avantara Vakya, Shravanam, Aparoksha Jnana, the Brahman experience will be there as actual directness, but not as understood directness. Paroksha is remoteness and Aparoksha is closeness, direct, proximity, and intimate. He goes on to introduce two types of Aparokshatvam, first of which is Swabhavika Parokshatvam as natural proximity to Brahman due to his Swabhava. Vidyaranya uses the word Vishaya Swaprakashatvam for this. This gets converted into the second type called Gnata Aparokshatvam or Avagata Aparokshatvam, when the Brahman experience which is already there is understood and becomes recognized proximity of directness. We call it Aparoksha Jnanam only after the second stage is achieved. Shloka 51. In this verse, Purvapakshi is treating Paroksha Jnana as misconception or Brahma, which will be convincingly refuted and established by Vidyaranya that it is knowledge only in the verses 52 to 56. Next slide, sir. Shloka 57. Here, he wants to compare the two types of knowledge, Aparoksha and Paroksha, in both the cases of the 10th man and Brahman. The knowledge of 10th man, which is Paroksha Jnana, and indirect knowledge of the 10th man, even though he happens to be directly available by himself, is considered as a valid knowledge or avibhrantam. We don't look at it as misconception or brahma. If valid indirect knowledge is possible with regard to the 10th man, then it is possible with regard to Brahman also. In both the cases of Dashamaha and Brahman, the mechanism is the same. Ignorance is doing the same thing. The Sat Amsha is concealed by Ajnana. That cover is removed by Paroksha Jnana. Shloka 58. When Paroksha Jnana is converted into Aparoksha Jnana, then the general knowledge of Brahman's existence is converted into specific knowledge of Brahman's existence. When Aparoksha Jnana takes place, the knowledge Brahma Asti gets particularized as Brahma Asmi, the ever-experienced consciousness. This Brahman identification process is called Mahavakya Vichara. Similarly, Dashamaha Asti gets particularized as Dashamaha Vam Asi. You are the 10th man. It is generally believed that the direct knowledge takes place only during Nididhyasanam, while the indirect knowledge takes place during Shravanam. Vidyaranya negates this and says both take place in Shravanam only. In fact, the knowing should be completed during the Shravanam only. If one jumps to Mananam and Nididhyasanam prematurely, he will have to come back to Shravanam later. So, Nididhyasanam is not for Brahmanubhava or for some mystical experience. It is wrong sadhana. Let's proceed to the next set of shlokas in today's class. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venkatesh Prasad, for an excellent recap of the verses from 37 to 58, which we studied in the last class. And by your study and by your explanation, it is very clear that you have understood how much wisdom has been packed in these verses in a very systematic manner. And that is the greatness of Pancadashi. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padambu Janmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane Atmanam Chit Vijaniya Ayam Asmiti Purushaha Kimichan Kasya Kamaya Shariram Anuswam Jvaret. Entire Tripti Deepa, which is 298 verses, are an explanation of this one verse from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where the student is none other than the king Janaka and the teacher is Yajnavalika. In the course of Pancadashi, there are many new terms that we have gone through, and because of its importance, I will touch on them once again. Two terms which will come again and again is what is Paroksha Jnanam or indirect knowledge. I wish to know about some place like Kailash Manasarovar. So I go through the available literature, and that indirect knowledge is called Paroksha Jnanam. One day when I get to go there directly, that knowledge that I get when I directly experience is called Aparoksha Jnanam. Now, what is the relevance of these two forms of Jnanam when we are studying the scriptures? Scriptures help us to discover our true nature, which is Atma or Brahman. And this is taught to us first indirectly by the Avantara Vakya. Those Vakyas which give a description of Atma or Brahman are called Avantara Vakya. Once the student is fairly prepared, the teacher now directs you to understand that all that we have studying about is that Brahman, that infinite nature, is none other than your true nature. And those words of introduction, that means first they give us information and then they give us introduction. Introduction, which is not a new experience, but a new understanding of yourself. And in that process, we get these words which are called Mahavakyas. We should know what is called Sattva Avaranam and Bhana Avaranam. Now, all our problems are because of ignorance or Avaranam. Maya Devi has the ability to cover our true nature. When the Sat, the existence of Brahman is covered, it is called Sattva Avaranam. And through Paroksha Jnanam, the Sattva Avaranam gets removed. Now, what is Bhana Avaranam? I am conscious. I experience this consciousness. But that consciousness I am, which is Brahman, I do not know. When a teacher introduces you to tell you that that consciousness in you is the real you through Mahavakya, then when I get that understanding, that Bhana Avaranam is removed. That is what is our whole journey from Brahma Asti to Brahma Asmi. We are all seekers of truth. We want to know the truth. But all teachers who share the truth know one thing. Whenever the truth is presented directly, the first reaction is one of rejection. We see this in our medical practice quite often in brain tumor problems, sometimes like this, tumors which occur in the brain stem can present in a very subtle manner. The child all the child may have is a newly developed squint. The eye is looking a little odd, otherwise the child is all right. The child is as playful as before. But then when the eye problem persists, they go to an eye doctor and then finally get a scan done. And once you see there is a certain problem like this, then now there is Google and other sources of information. The family is alerted to a serious problem in the brain. And that is when we get to see these patients for the first time. Not just the child, but the child with the parents, grandparents, and other relatives come to your operating room. And the first question is, once they show you the scan and to tell about the child's problem, they want to look into your eyes and know, doctor, what is the truth? Can you tell us what is the problem? And I know for certain that I cannot present the truth directly for the same reason. Because if I tell the truth as it is, the first reaction is one of rejection. And our own training over the years has been that we still have to present the truth, but in a manner that still gives them hopes. And at the same time, they don't feel too upset about the truth. Now, this is what is being done in Vedanta also. In our day-to-day life also, whenever we do something good, whenever we do some, spend a lot of time and done some work which you think is good work, we indirectly or directly look for feedback. Many often people don't even notice something has happened. And then sometimes when we directly ask for feedback, the question that we want to know is this: are we really looking for feedback, or are we looking for words of appreciation or words of reassurance? See, the human mind is always wanting words of appreciation and reassurance. And if somebody is critical, then we begin to be very defensive. And even taking a feedback, even if there is an element of truth, is very difficult. So with this background, let us see how Vedantic teachers present the truth. We are now not looking at an ordinary truth. We are looking at the highest truth, which is called Paramarthika. This is a story of a shop, an apparent store in France, which had the board saying Truth Shop. And a person who was doing window shopping was amazed and saying, my God, they have truth here for sale. So he enters very boldly and says, do you have truth for sale? And the sales lady says, yes, sir. What percentage of truth are you looking for? This man says, if you have truth, I want 100% truth. She says, very well. But the moment he looks at the price tag, he starts walking to the door. Now, what does this mean? It means I want the truth. I want this Paramarthika Satya that this Pancadashi can give me. But am I willing to pay the price that it asks for? Am I willing to make all the effort that is to help me to transcend this ordinary existence and to discover something of the extraordinary? We will see even in the 10th man story, when the teacher recognized that the 10th man who was searching for the 10th man and was so upset, if the teacher would tell him, you are the 10th man, he is going to reject. So he had to do a certain process, and that is called a prakriya, until he is able to discover. So too in the story of Karna, when Kunti tells him, you are my son, he is not able to believe until she explains the whole story behind it. Now, this is the same as we have said in our journey from Brahma Asti to Brahma Asmi. That means we cannot present the truth directly. We have to give it in the form of a certain prakriya. Now, in today's classes, we will be going through various Upanishadic stories, Upanishadic verses, and also from Vakya Vritti of Adi Shankara, to tell us how do we understand that what we are looking for is none other than my true nature. What is the ultimate objective? The ultimate objective is called Aparoksha Nubhuti. All of us know what is I am. I am conscious and I am existent. But this awareness of I am is called Aparoksha Nubhuti. Our teacher says Brahma Anubhava. That means the experience of I am is there all the time. Because Brahman is that because of which I am conscious, because of which I am able to speak, because of which you are able to listen. What we need is not new information, but what we need is an introduction that this conscious principle is none other than Brahman itself. Wherever you go, whenever people have to wait in airports, in bus stands or somewhere, you will see people are together, but all of them are holding a handheld device and all their attention is on some object. Now, can we go one step further? You are continuing to listen to me. You are watching me on the screen. Can you move from the object of your experience to someone inside you who is observing all this, who is listening? Now, this shift from the object to the subject is Aparokshanubhuti, is the shift from Paroksha to Aparoksha. And this is what Kenopanishad says, Pratibodha Viditam Matam Amritam Hi Vindate. You attain to immortality just by discovering that conscious principle, I am. So again, to conclude, Aparoksha Jnanam of Brahman is not a new experience, but it is a new knowledge. What is the new knowledge? That the ever-evident conscious principle is what is told by the teachers as Tatitvam Asi. This new knowledge is called Aparoksha Anubhuti. In today's class, from verses 61 to 90, is what we are going to study from 61 to 90, but the Mahavakya Vichara, which is given in a process, will be studied in today's class. Our opening speaker is Dr. Kiran. Dr. Kiran, please.
Namaste, Hari Om, Gurubhyo Namah. Today we will reaching the climax of the 10th man story and then moving on to Mahavakya. First the verse 59. Dashamaha ka iti prashne tvameva iti nirakrite ghana etva svena saha swameva dashamam smaret. He says, when asked who is the 10th, having heard that he himself is the 10th, what he does, he doesn't say that, oh, I am the 10th. He counts himself along with others, and then he realizes, that is what is called as Aparoksha, that he is the 10th man. This is the direct knowledge. In Kathopanishad, Yama laments that all the sense organs we have, it looks and is directed outside, and nothing is there which we can direct inwards. So from the world outside, we should turn inside to see the real 10th man. Why you should look for 10th man? Because you yourself are the 10th man. As Sir told, you yourself are the experiencer, the person who is there throughout the day, in night, when the mind is totally asleep, in every experience, when you are seeing everything and in nothing, the only person who is there is you. And this is the ever consciousness, the chit, which everybody talks about, and this is nothing but you. Before understanding, let us put some foundation into it. Next slide, please. How to find the 10th man? As Venkatesh ji has hammered it repeatedly, it is only by direct shravanam, hearing from a guru, we can learn this. And important caveat here is, you should know the 9 men. Otherwise, you can't know the 10th man. You should count the 9th man and then you will realize here. So who are these 9 men? That is the Jagat, or the Anatma is the 9 men. And after knowing this, you move yourself, that is the 10th man. So, Sarva Priyanandji says very beautifully, the 10th man counts the other 9, each of whom is visible to him, but he forgets himself. What a tragedy it is. And though his self is ever known to him, even while counting, he knows he is counting, but the tragedy he doesn't know. So in every world, we are seeing that same consciousness, that same Ishvara, that same Brahman, that same Atma, but we forget that and get caught in this world. We are so busy in that we forget this, the source of everything, the foundation of everything, the Adhishtanam that is running through every experience. Next slide. In every experience, in everything, you are searching for you alone. In the world, in friends, oh, this friend is dear to me, that is, no, I don't like him much. In God, oh, Krishna is Purushottama, and somebody says Shiva is Mahadeva. Somebody just says Jesus is forgiving and Allah is everything. Are these all different lords? No, it is all your own expansion and your own being which is transferred there. However much you deny, it is you who are looking for always. And that's why when he says Tattvamasi, it is always Aham brahmasmi. Every man you count is the 10th man. Whether you start from the first or the last, it is you who are reflected alone through all the reflecting medium. It is you who is alone. So knowing you, you know everything. Next slide, please. This knowledge, this paravidya, even when you lose memory or you become dementic, is never lost, because this is the real you. Next slide. And hence, who am I? When we say it is you, the person you are searching is you alone. And how to do it? There is always a misconception about Ramana Maharshi teaching that we have to sit and meditate and chant on who am I, means we have to keep on chanting. No, that is not the way. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Now, how do we look for? The method is through systematic studying, that is knowledge and an able guru, and by contemplating on it, as Venkatesh ji has said, through mananam and nididhyasana. Sadeva eti vakyana brahmasattvam parokshataha grihatva tattvam asyadi Vakya Vyaktim Samuchet. This is very important verse. Satya Vetad Vakyana. Through statements such as existence alone, Brahma Satyam, existence of truth, we learn that is Parokshataha. Even this knowledge, Mahavakyam, in first gives it is Paroksha Jnana, indirect knowledge. One thing we should learn is this Vedas, Upanishads are not system. They are not religion. They are not what we call some system of something. It is what is called as pramanas. It is the tool. Just like how you use telescope to see, these Mahavakyas are the tool like with which you experience or you examine the world. And I bet that this can never be untruth. Whatever is given in Upanishad many thousands years ago, even now when you examine it logically, you can never disprove one single word of it. That is the thing. You use it and examine, like how Socrates says, your own life, then you will find that everything is true. And ultimately, you is revealed, not that, it comes from nowhere. You are there and it is revealed. Having ascertained indirectly and then examined, you will realize that you are Tattvamasi, Aham brahmasmi. Next slide. And how to, after that, after Shravana, what to do? Aporaksha. That is, you contemplate on it. And merely by chanting or meditating, one does not get this self-knowledge. First, by studying under an able guru, through Paravidya, we do it. Then by contemplating these statements, that Tattvamasi, we understand it and our true self is revealed. Knowledge alone, in Chandogya Upanishad says, he tells it 9 times that you are Tattvamasi. If it was any other way, he could have just told it. So he keeps on telling 9 times. In Kathopanishad, I think 14 times he tells the these words. Just to understand, this is not an experience. I'll give you an example. When you're learning bicycle, first, your father or the person will hold your cycle and you learn it. And once you learn the bicycle, that knowledge is awareness. And that is not an experience. You don't get any halo around you saying that you have learned bicycle. This experience, similarly, this Aporaksha, that is the crystal clear awareness that you are that is what is called as Brahma Jnanam. When somebody asked Ramakrishna whether you are seeing Brahman, he says, I seeing it more clearly than I am seeing this world with my eyes. That sort of, real confirmed knowledge we should have. And I'm sure in Pancadashi we will have at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kiran, for a very nice explanation of these 2 verses. This is what Swamiji emphasizes very much as we are studying Pancadashi, that all we need to do after having gone through the Dashama story is to clearly understand that I am that 10th man that I am looking for. I am Atma. Once that is understood, nothing other than clear understanding is required. Early in our study itself, we will realize, and if we are able to realize this, my sadhana is over, my spiritual exercise is over. And then why do we continue the study? Only for one reason, to remind ourselves that I have already accomplished whatever there is to be accomplished. My journey is over. So we saw these 2 verses explained to us by Kiran. And here we are now starting to use various Upanishadic verses, and these are verses from the Chandogya. Now, initially, this verse, Sadeva Saumya Idamagra Asit, Sadeva, those are Paroksha Jnanam. And after giving an introduction of Brahman, the teacher, after having prepared the student, then gives the Mahavakya, that is the Tattvamasi Mahavakya. This verse, Sadeva Saumya Idamagra Asit, is such an important verse that Sri Vidyaranya Swami has devoted a good part of the 2nd chapter of Pancadashi to be able to explain, just like we are doing Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat. The 2nd chapter deals with this one verse, Sadeva Saumya Idamagra Asit. Dr. Komal will explain the next 2 verses. Dr. Komal, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We are seeing Brahmajnana being taught in 2 steps. Vidyaranya Muni takes us to the stage 4 and 5 of the 7 steps in the Dashama story to take us from Paroksha Jnana to Aporaksha Jnana. He takes help of the Vakyas from Upanishads, as we started seeing. So there are 2 types of statements which are in the Upanishads called Avantara Vakya and Mahavakya. Avantara Vakyas are secondary sentences which indicate the nature of truth, whereas Mahavakyas are the great sentences which directly indicates the oneness of self and the truth. So Avantara Vakyas will say either directly, like existence, consciousness, infinitude is the truth, or indirectly it will say, see, from there, from which all the beings are born, that is the truth. Such statements lead to indirect knowledge, Paroksha Jnana of the self or the truth. Whereas Mahavakya is direct, like Tattvamasi, you are that. I am Atma Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma, Aham brahmasmi. So here, after knowing that you are that self, when it is directly told, then the student will have to do an inquiry into Mahavakya, which will lead to the Aporoksha Jnana. So this is the subtle transition, but a very major transition which happens from indirect knowledge to direct knowledge. Paroksha Jnana to Aporoksha Jnana. As we see in the next slide, in this part of Pancadashi, we see numerous examples from Upanishads. We saw from Chandogya Upanishad, where say Judalaka teaches Shvetaketu, Tattvamasi Shvetaketu, like that. Next, the examples are taken from Taittiriya Upanishad, again from Taittiriya Upanishad in verse 66, then goes to Chandogya Upanishad, and again in verse 68, we see also example from Aitiriya Upanishad. In the next slide, we see that realization takes place. The steps to realization is through, the first is indirect knowledge, followed by direct knowledge. We saw in Chandogya Upanishad from Samaveda, where Shvetaketu and Sejudalaka, the teaching happens. Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asit Ekameva Advitiyam. In the beginning, there existed truth alone, one without a second. So this part is the indirect knowledge. Next, he continues to say, Tat Satyam Sa Atma Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. So that's the direct instruction that you are that truth, yourself is that truth. So that's the direct Aporoksha Jnana. So in the next slide, we jump to the other Upanishad, which is Taittiriya Upanishad of Yajurveda. Here, sage Varuna teaches Bhrigu through indirect knowledge. What does he say? Yato va imani bhutani jayanti, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayatnyas bhisam vishanti, tad vijijnasatsva, tad brahmeti. So from where all the things are born, the cause, the origins. What is the cause of the origin? What's the cause of the sustenance? And to which the entire thing dissolves eventually. The entire thing in the universe eventually dissolves into. Think about that, and you keep thinking about it. So this is what the indirect knowledge Varuna says to Bhrigu. And being a good, intelligent student, Bhrigu is able to catch that direct knowledge by repeatedly doing inquiry within himself about the nature of that truth. As we see in the next slide, the verse goes like this. Anna pranadi kosheshu suvicharya punah punaha ananda vyakti mikshitva brahmalakshyapya yuyujat. So what he was told was like Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. Each one of these you take and you negate that. And then what remains from which? So first he takes Annamaya Kosha as the one from which whole universe is born. Then he realizes the folly and goes back. What next would be guiding this? Pranamaya Kosha. Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha. Like sequentially, he keeps on inquiring punah punaha, and then he discards one after the other, and he finally realizes the Aporaksha Jnana of I am that Brahman. So he acquired the direct knowledge by differentiating the self from the 5 sheaths, by inquiring, punah punaha, by inquiring within himself. So that final stage, even though the Mahavakya says that directly, that inquiry within yourself is the most important step, which gives the direct knowledge. In the next slide, we see the next verse, which is again taken from Taittiriya Upanishad. Here, again, there's a Avantara Vakya, which gives us a Paroksha Jnanam. What does it say? Satyam Jnanam Anantam Chetyevam Brahma Lakshanam Uktva Guhahi Tatvena Koshe Shvetat Pradarshitam. So here, Satyam, pure existence which is not connected to any object. Jnanam, that pure aspect of consciousness, awareness, which is not connected to any thought. And Anantatvam, which is limitlessness. So once we get this to Satyam Jnanam Anantam, Chetvam Brahma Swalakshanam. So these are the Swarupa of Brahma. Then Aparaksha Jnana is given as residing in the Panchakosha, that is Uktva Guhahit Tatvena. So first line is about the indirect knowledge. And second line is, once we know that, he says in the Upanishad, Yo Veda Nihita Guhayam. Meaning, like once you inquire that inside this 5 sheets, again the same example is taken, what resides within, that Satyam Jnanam Anantam. So that is you. So that's the direct way. That's the Aparoksha Jnana which is given at the end. Okay, so in this verse, in the previous verse, it's only the Paroksha Jnana, where the student, Bhrigu, takes the Aparoksha Jnana by doing the inquiry within himself. Whereas here, the other verse from Taittiriya Upanishad, here it says both indirect knowledge as well as the Aparoksha Jnana. So from here onwards, we keep seeing these verses repeatedly. We should remember that Pancadashi is an advanced text, and these are taken as if the student, that is us, have a detailed knowledge of these Upanishads which we have gone through earlier. So these verses, they will directly take the gist of that verse and put it here to remind us how this Mahavakyas and Avantara Vakyaas repeatedly tells us and takes us from this Paroksha Jnana to Aparoksha Jnana. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Komal, for a nice explanation. This is a very big job because we are going through Mahavakya Vichara, and we are going to see how we are using the Avantara Vakya, which initially gives you indirect knowledge. And then when the student is ready, the teacher gives the Mahavakya. And of course, Vidyaranya Swami has given a whole set of verses from Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda, and we have seen a sample of them. This continues, and Nilima will continue. Nilima, please.
Jai Gurudev. Going ahead, 69th verse. Meaning of this verse is, indirect knowledge of Brahman can be gained from other scriptural statements, but direct knowledge is gained by inquiry into Mahavakyas. Now we are seeing the context where Avantara Vakyas like Atma idam agra asid or Sarvam kalvidam Brahma. This gives indirect knowledge or Paroksha Jnana. We come to know Brahma asti. And the seeker contemplates on these statements, and thereafter through Mahavakyas one gains Aparoksha Jnana, Brahma asmi. By Shravana, one gets a clear understanding, and it is the only means for Aparoksha Jnana. Manana and Nididhyasana helps to remove only Viparita Bhavana, so as Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga. Next slide, sir. Nididhyasana is to remind oneself as I am Asanga Atma, that I was free, I am free, and I'll be free. And my freedom is unconditional in spite of body-mind complex. For example, fire may appear round when it gets in contact with the iron ball. In truth, fire is beyond any form. In the next verse, in the 71st verse, the meaning of it, like the consciousness, which is the basis for the word, and the idea, I, which is intertwined with the mind, is indicated by the word tvam, you. From 71st verse, we are entering into Mahavakya Vichara, where Brahma Chaitanya eva satyam pratibimba mitya. Every guru struggles to convey to his students that Brahma alone is truth and Jiva is Nitya. It's like removing husk from paddy with continuous pounding. In the next slide, Mahavakya, which shows oneness of Jiva and Brahma, is the only source for Aporaksha Jnana. Tat Tvama Asi, Mahavakya from Chandogya Upanishad, Adi Shankaracharya ji advises in Vakyavritti seekers to negate primary meaning or Vakyartha, in which consciousness is conditioned by mind as Karta, Bhokta. This limited consciousness, because of this contradicting nature with Tvampada, Adi Shankaracharya advises to go for Lakshyartha or secondary meaning of Tvampada, which is free from attributes for Jiva, Brahma, Aikya. In Tvampada Shodhana, we can see like in Drishya Viveka, we know objects is Drishya, seen, and eyes are Drik, seer. Then eyes are Drishya, seen, and the mind is Drik, seer. Then mind is Drishya, object, then consciousness is Drik, seer. One comes to Chaitanya, Atma Tattva. By letting go of Upadhi or conditionings, or by Bhagatyaga Lakshana, oneness of Jiva and Brahma is achieved, which is the essence of Mahavakyas. In coming verses, we will see more clearly of Mahavakya Vichara. Jai Gurudev.
Thank you very much, Nilima, for continuing to explain these two verses. What we have heard in a sense is every teacher is struggling to share their understanding, because now they have understood. They have understood that their true nature, that they are Brahman. So all we need to do is listen to Swami Paramarthananda, Swami Tadatmananda, Swami Anubhavananda explaining these verses. And as you are listening, some shift will occur, because that is what we are doing is just giving knowledge is not enough. But I want you to do this nididhyasanam, or reflecting on these words. Direct meaning is this: there are two kinds of statements. One is called the Avantara Vakya, which prepares you to get to know what is Brahman, which gives you Paroksha Jnanam. But most important is that process should prepare us to receive the Mahavakya, and when we are able to say, I am that. Now, from now on, from verses 70, 71 onwards, Vidyaranya Swami now uses the words of Vakyavritti of Adi Shankara, which is a wonderful analysis of Mahavakya. And how do we get to understand what is this Tat, what is this Tvam, and how do we equate this Tat and Tvam? And that is our class, which will be listening to. The next speaker, Tribeni, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Mayopadihi Jagadyonihi Sarvatnatvadi Lakshanaha Paroksha Shabalaha Satyat Atmakaha Tat Padabhidaha. Consciousness conditioned by Maya as the cause for the universe, characterized as is all-knowing, etc., known indirectly, whose nature is existence, etc., is indicated by the word tat, means that. This is Vakyavritti Shloka number 45, literally taken from Adi Shankaracharya's work. Vakyavritti is a text of 52 Sanskrit slokas attributed to Adi Shankara and is in the form of a dialogue between an eager student and an enlightened teacher. The primary or direct meaning of Tat in the Mahavakya is Paramatma, or the consciousness associated with Maya, the macro medium. It has superior virtues and it is the material cause of the Srishti. It is also characterized by omniscience, omnipotence, etc., which indicates the Upadana Karana. Jivatma has the Karya status. That Paramatma is considered to be remote or far away beyond the reach of the sense organs. That is when people refer to Paramatma, they look up, which means that Paramatma is beyond the clouds. These are all Tatastha Lakshana of Paramatma. Swarupa Lakshana of Paramatma is Satyam, Gnanam, Anantam, Brahma, and it is the superior consciousness. Tat means that. That means Ishvara, the god of creation, who wields Maya as his instrument of action through the Sattva Guna of Maya, the Shuddha Sattva Pradhana of Prakriti. By this, Brahman, reflected through the pure Sattva of Prakriti, becomes the creation, the sustenance, and the dissolution of the universe in himself. God becomes the creator, destroyer, the preserver, and everything connected with the world by his transcendence on the one hand and his immanence in the world on the other hand. As God is not exhausted in this world, he is transcendent. He is also immanent. He is omniscient. Sarvajnatvadi lakshanaha. Sarvajnatvadi means omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. God is all pervading, so we call him omnipresent. He is all knowing, so we call him omniscient. He is all powerful, so we call him omnipotent. This is what we get from the Mahavakya. How can the creator be equated to a creature? Therefore, what should we do? And then we move on to the next shloka. Pratyak parokshata ekasya sadvitiyatva purnata virudhyete yatah tasmat lakshana sampravartate. Immediate, direct, dual, complete, because these qualities in one thing are contradictory. The implied meaning must be employed. We should always apply the primary meaning in the interpretation because it is primary. Always value is there for the primary meaning only. Only when the primary meaning does not give a meaningful sense, we should refer to the secondary meaning. In case the sentence is invalid when we apply the primary meaning, we can come down to the secondary meaning for the Vedavakya to become a pramana. Therefore, Adi Shankaracharya says in Vakyavritti 46 that we find a contradiction in the meanings when we take the primary meanings of Tat and Tvam. There are two types of contradictions that we see. The first contradiction is Jivatma is Pratyak, which means it is I, the inner self, obtaining in the body. Therefore, Tvam refers to something which is inside. But the word Tat, that Paramatma, refers to something which is far away. How can the close by object and remote object be one and the same? Jivatma is close by and Paramatma is far away. There will be no resistance. When we say both of them are one and the same, there is resistance. In Mahavakya, there is a contradiction. Therefore, Eka, one and the same entity, cannot be both inside and outside. This is contradiction 1. The Jivatma is always in plural number. There are infinite Jivatmas, they are innumerable, plants, animals, devas, etc. Each one should be Apurna only naturally. Each Jivatma is located in each body. Therefore, Jivatma is Apurna while Paramatma is Purna. One is Apurna and another is Purna when we take the general primary meanings before the study of Vedanta. These are the meanings by the ordinary person before he studies Vedanta. Now, Visishtadvaitins take Jivatma as Anu. Most of the people claim Jivatma is finite and Paramatma is Purna. How can Purnatva and Apurnatva be one and the same? The second contradiction is one is finite while the other is infinite. These opposite ideas contradict each other. Since such contradictions are there and since the intellect is unable to swallow the idea, how can I claim I am Ishvara? When there is a powerful resistance, we have to apply some lubricating oil, which is called Lakshana Vritti in this case. Therefore, we have to take the secondary meanings of Tat and Tvam. The identity of Ishvara and Jiva is difficult to explain because of their dissimilar characters. Remote is Ishvara, immediately experienceable is Jiva. There is a second to the individual finitude, there is no second to Ishvara. These are the dissimilarities observable in Ishvara and Jiva. How could one be the same as the other? The identity of these two can be explained only by analogies and illustrations, says Swamiji. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Triveni, for a very clear explanation of these two verses. And that is how you will see each teacher has to struggle, because what is the job now? To tell us that although I look so ordinary, although I look so limited, and Bhagavan or Paramatma is so limitless, far away, we think, how can I be the same as that? So there are so many differences. So teachers give us various examples and somehow try to convey the information. And one sort of example that we have worked on many times is the example of the wave and the ocean. How do we equate a wave which is so limited, which has got a certain nama and rupa, a name and form, and the ocean which is limitless and vast? But if you really look into the essence of the wave is water, and the essence of the ocean is also water. So there is a process what is called Bhagatyaga. We will be studying that in all these verses. Bhagatyaga means take the essence, what is not so essential, what is mithya, you have to negate. And this is what the teachers are trying to help us, that consciousness in me is the essential nature of Bhagavan. And so don't give too much importance to the body-mind and discover the Atma Tattva within all of us. The last two verses for today's class on the same theme. Smita, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. From 70th shloka up to 96th shloka, Swami Vidyaranya does Mahavakya Vichara closely following the teachings of Vakyavritti of Sri Adi Shankaracharya to show that the Mahavakya Vichara will give Aporaksha Jnanam. In this shloka, that is shloka of 74, Adi Shankaracharya ji applies Bhagatyaga Lakshana. The verse goes like this: Tattvamasyadi Vakyeshu Lakshana Bhaga Lakshana Soyamityadi Vakyasta Padoyoriva Napara. In this shloka, Swami Vidyaranya says, we cannot take the primary meaning of the shloka of the two words in Tattvamasi, because if you take primary meaning, it will not be logically acceptable with one having superior and the other having inferior attributes. In this shloka, we take a part of the primary meaning while giving up the other part. This is called Bhagatyaga Lakshana. He gives an example of Soyam Devadattaha. That young Devadatta is this old Devadatta. Here, the body and the bodily attributes should not be taken into consideration. That is, Devadatta minus the young and the old bodies. Here we refer to the person alone, that is a Vyakti is retained, and body is not taken into consideration. This is called Bhagatyaga Lakshana, which is a secondary meaning. As we know, the primary meaning of Jivatma is Shariratraya and Chaitanya. Paramatma is Prapancha and Chaitanya. Through Bhagatyaga Lakshana, the Chaitanya part of the primary meaning is retained, while Shariratraya and Prapanchatraya are rejected. Chaitanya, which is found in both, is taken into consideration. Only at Chaitanya level, Aikya is possible. Both at Shariratraya and Prapanchatraya, Aikya is not possible. Even at Chidabhasa level, Aikya is not possible. Wherever Aikya is not possible, we reject, and whatever suppose Aikya, we retain. Now, verse 75 establishes the relationship of the words Tattvam. Verses 76 to 79 further elaborates on essential oneness between Jivatma and Paramatma, explains what happens when the implied meaning of the Mahavakya is realized, and the principles of Vedanta is expressed through the previous shloka is reaffirmed. Now coming to the verse 80th. Astam shastrasya siddhanto yuktya vakyat paroksha dihi Swargadi Vakyavat yenaiva dashame vyabicharataha. Swami Vidyaranya establishes that Mahavakya Vichara is capable of giving Aparoksha Jnana of Atma. He established this with the help of Vakyavritti shlokas of Adi Shankaracharya, which we have heard in the previous shlokas. Then Purvapaksha raises a question that no sentence or Vakya can give direct knowledge of any object. The Purvapaksha's argument is Mahavakya can give only Paroksha Jnana. Their view is Shravana gives Paroksha Jnana and meditation gives Aparoksha Jnana. He gives the example of Swarga. In the Veda Purva Bhaga, we get the description of Swarga described by Nachiketa. When we hear the description, the knowledge of Swarga is indirect knowledge. In the same way, Mahavakya relates to Vedanta. A Vedic sentence, even in Vedanta, can give only indirect knowledge, exactly like the Vedic sentence describing Swarga. Swami Vidyaranya says, it is not so. It is because there is an exception to the rule, as we find in the Dashame, the 10th man's story. In the case of 10th man, the Vakya did not produce indirect knowledge, but immediately realized the truth. It is an exception to the rule. And this exception is called Vyabicharaha. Once the exception comes to the rule, the rule is gone. The Mahavakya also can fall within this exception, because when we say that mountain has smoke, there is fire, it is right conclusion, because the mountain has fire, there should be smoke. But we cannot say wherever there is fire, there is smoke. Therefore, when you take the rule, that is, wherever there is smoke, there is fire, similarly, a statement gives only Paroksha Jnana is a wrong rule, and the exception is Dashami, the 10th man story. It is a deviation from the rule. Dhanyavadaha.
Thank you very much, Smita, for a nice explanation of these two verses. We are concluding this Mahavakya with a Soyam Devadatta example. For example, when you look at your photograph when you are a small boy or a small girl, you will see it is you alone. And then many years later, if you see yourself, your body has changed, your mind has changed. But there is something in that small child which has been there all through, which has never changed. That means I am someone other than my body and mind. The teacher helps you to recognize what is that which was there in that small child. And that is what is called I am, or that consciousness existence principle. And this recognition, that is why all these are words of, these Mahavakya words are not words of information, they are words of recognition. And in Sanskrit that is called Pratyabhijna. That means you help us to recognize your true nature. And finally, we come to another verse which Smita has very nicely explained. And there comes the Purvapaksha. See, whenever a Purvapaksha comes, all these thoughts are made very clear. The Purvapaksha's argument is, now a sentence is a sentence. How can you say you are that, you are Paramatma, and expect you to know that you are that? For example, we give you the example of Aparoksha Vakya and Paroksha Vakya, for example. Now I get knowledge about Kailash indirectly, but I have to travel there to be able to get that experience. So the Purvapaksha says, you will get knowledge about Atma or Swarga through the Avantara Vakya, But then you have to go through Nirvikalpaka Samadhi. You have to do a lot of processes to be able to experience directly. Now, Vidyaranya has to break that statement, which is called an Anumana or an inferential statement. What is an inferential statement? An inferential statement makes use of a certain inference. That means that wherever there is smoke, there must be fire. Now, if there is a truth in that, and there is no, let me say, there is no exception to that, then I can use that inference as true. But Vidyaranya says, now take the Dashama example. In the Dashama example, the teacher initially gave Paroksha Jnanam, that the 10th man exists. And the same teacher uses only Vakya. And he says, you are that. And the student gets it. So in the Dashame, there is a Vyabhichara. That means there is one exception, and therefore you cannot use this inferential statement. Finally, what Vidyaranya wants to conclude, through Mahavakya, through these Mahavakya statement, it is possible to get Brahma Vidya. You don't have to do anything else. Our teacher says this much only. Clear knowledge that you get about your true nature is all that is required.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to all the speakers for giving us the greatest knowledge and giving it to us on a platter. We are truly blessed. Mahavakya must be clear, and the prakriya of Bhaga Tyaga Lakshana must also be clear to us. Like the 10th man, I was ignorant, but now I know I'm not the body-mind complex. My problems are not so real. I lend existence to these problems. World has a dependent reality. I lend existence to this world. I have direct knowledge of the self, direct anubhuti, Aporaksha anubhuti, a reintroduction to the self. This is a very special knowledge and has to be taught in a very special way, stepwise. Although I don't feel like I'm free, I am the highest truth. I don't feel that way. I must learn to accept it, surely, but slowly but surely we'll get it. Tripti Deepa will help us make the big leap. Vidyaranya was a great master, and our salutations to him. The next session, session 8 of Pancadashi, chapter 7, will be premiered on 28th August 2023. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Hari Om.